I want you all to think back just for a second, back to when you were just 5 years old. And I want you to think about what you used to do for fun when you were a 5-year-old kid. So, what are some things you used to do when you were 5? Yeah.
I used to draw with chalk.
Draw with chalk?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Make up games in my backyard with my brothers.
Very cool.
Climb trees.
Climb trees.
If I could.
Well, that's funny. That's actually what I used to do when I was a little kid too. The house I grew up in had a huge yard, front and backyard, and had bushes and trees all over the place. And I used to climb up in the trees. I used to crawl into the bushes and find kind of like rooms, I guess you could call them, in the bushes, and just use my imagination, just make up games, kind of like what Skylar said, and just be creative as a little kid, you know. And it's interesting to think back on that sometimes, because I personally don't feel like I'm nearly as creative as I was when I was 5. I can't entertain myself just sitting in a bush or in a tree using my imagination anymore. I just can't do it. And it's interesting because really we're born as creative individuals. Creativity isn't something that we learn over time. It's just something that we're naturally born with. And to kind of prove that, there's a guy, his name is George Land, and he was approached by NASA like 50 years ago to do a creativity assessment. And what they wanted to learn, or they were just looking for the best engineers possible to work for NASA. They needed people who were innovative and creative to solve problems. And so Mr. Land created his assessment to figure out if people were creative or not and good for the job, right? And it turns out that this assessment was really, really effective of kind of figuring out if someone was a creative person or not. So he decided to kind of do a little test with this. And he took the exact same assessment he used for NASA, and he gave it to 5-year-olds, and had the 5-year-olds take it to see if they're creative or not. And the results of this were like, if you could describe a person as creative or not, a creative individual, right? So it's kind of like a, yes, they're creative, no, they're creative. No, they're not creative, I mean. So he tested these 5-year-olds, a group of 5-year-olds, and the percentage of the 5-year-olds that were creative was 98%, which is a ton of 5-year-olds, if you think about it. 98% of us, when we were 5, were creative individuals. And so he found that very interesting, those results. So what he did next is he tested the exact same kids just 5 years later when they're 10. So same group of kids, 5 years later. And what do you think happened to the amount of creativity in this group? It went down, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot.
Maybe a lot.
Maybe a lot? A lot. It dropped all the way down to 30%. Which is crazy to think, and just from a 5-year-old to 10-year-old, suddenly 68% of them were not creative anymore. Which is crazy to think about, and it kind of proves it that we really were creative individuals. We were just born that way. It wasn't something that we learned. But instead, we were becoming uncreative the older we get. Mr. Land kept going with this. Same group of kids, 5 years later, now they're 15 years old, and it just kept dropping. And it's just interesting to see that, right? And he did the same assessment with a bunch of adults this time. And of all the adults that he assessed, only 2% of them were considered as being creative individuals. So obviously, creativity is something that we're born with. It's not something that we learn. Instead, what we're learning is uncreative behavior, whether it be through school or society or whatever the case may be. And it's definitely a big problem right now. People are always looking for creative individuals, whether it be huge problems in the world, like ending world hunger, or whatever the case may be. We need creative and innovative people who can solve problems and think outside the box to solve these different varieties of problems. And one group, IBM, went to a group of CEOs. They surveyed 3,000 different CEOs from all across the world. And in their survey, they asked them what they were worried about in their businesses or what their priorities were, and what kept them up at night, whatever the case may be, you know. And the same answer, the top answer for these CEOs in regards to what's most important for their businesses was creativity. And they wanted people to work for their company that could solve problems, that could think outside the box, just like we were talking about, right? They needed people who could come up with new ideas to make their business better. That's what they're most focused on. That's their biggest priority. So we can see that not only just all over the world in huge, large-scale problems we need creativity, but even just the CEOs want to make their company better. They're looking for creative individuals. So we can see that creativity is definitely something that's important. So the next question is, how do we become, or how do we kind of relearn that creative behavior that we were born with? My personal experience is creativity is just by doing. You can't really pick up a book about creativity and read it and suddenly become a creative individual. No more than you can pick up a book about basketball and become the next Michael Jordan. It just doesn't work that way. You actually have to go out and do it, you know? So I passed out papers earlier. And what we're going to do now is I want you all to think about something that you want to learn to do. Whether it's drawing, if you want to learn how to doodle a little better, if you want to learn a musical instrument, maybe you have something, a passion or a talent that you already have, and you want to focus on improving that, that works too. And I want you to put that on paper. But the trick is, we're not just going to write this down. This is a presentation of creativity, so I want you to draw what you want to learn how to do. So I'm going to give you about a minute or so. Just draw one thing, more than one thing, if you have more than one thing you want to learn how to do, and just draw away. Need a little more time. A little more time.
A little more.
Okay, a little more time. So, I hope you've all kind of found something, drawn something that you're excited about, that you're excited to learn how to do, whatever it is. I'll share what I drew real quick. It's a guitar here with a microphone. And I drew a guitar because I want to keep practicing playing guitar. I already know how to play, kind of. I want to keep practicing that, and also want to keep learning how to sing. I don't feel like my voice is all that great sometimes, but I'm going to keep practicing, and hopefully I'll get better. So I hope you've all found something that you're excited about to learn. And one last piece of advice I want to give you all before we close is to not be afraid of failure. Chances are you're going to run into some problems as you're trying to learn this new thing, whatever it is. And that's normal. It's part of the creative process, right? So don't get discouraged when that happens. Just keep working through it, and whatever failures you might have will become learning moments more than anything. And just remember this quote from Albert Einstein. It says, imagination is more important than knowledge, which is huge for creativity. Sometimes we don't always know how to do something, but if we're creative about it, if we think hard about it, be innovative, we figure it out. And in that case, imagination is definitely more important than knowledge. So have fun with whatever it is that you're going to learn how to do. Thank you. And here's my audience. Say hi, everyone.